When a beautiful dawn breaks over a pretty and small French town, crows decide to ruin everybody's sleep. They caw, and probably the prejudice against them especially grows in this town. But two children pay no heed to the dazzling song of the birds. They are playing hide and seek in a wide riverside area. Whether it is the crows or some other dark machines, however, one of them suddenly disappears from the face of the earth. She gets behind a tree and, as if the soil opened up its mouth, never comes back. Going to the future then, we see two women in one room. Their names are Nina and Meline, and they have a very special and strong bond. They are both pensioners, and having lived lengthy and passionate lives, their relationship is as honed as ever. As surprising as it is, even sexual desire hasn't faded away. Getting a better glimpse of Medeline's life, we learn that she has two children, one of whom is a hairstylist. Her name is Anne. As it seems, there has been a lot of conflict within the family, usually because of the supposed cheating. What a despicable lie. But now everything appears to be well. It is that night when the couple goes for a dance. Life is as beautiful as it gets. Love stands firmly against the passing of time, and a couple of Nina and Meline dance on. They're only a little tipsy. Let's just hope that their kidneys are as strong as their love. The next morning, a man named Bremont pays Meline a visit. He is here to see her apartment, and naturally Nina cannot be walking around as she often does. She has an apartment of her own just next door. So before the man comes, she walks over there and comes back as a neighbor after a few minutes. Bremont seems to be the man responsible for coming up with the price of the apartment. We learn in the next scene that the two are planning to sell the apartment and fly to Rome for good. There is one serious problem that needs to be taken care of first, however. Medeline's family must know, and she has to come up with a way to tell them. It must be a really stressful business to even think about the upcoming revelation. Frederick and Anne both pay her a visit in the next scene. As it turns out, it is Medeline's birthday today. Perhaps all the attention should be directed at her, but the only person who notices the gloom on her face is her grandchild named Theo, a sweet kid whose only problems are school-related. Time ticks away, and tension keeps rising and rising. It is almost an impossible task for Meline to tell her children that she's selling their father's house and going away with her girlfriend at the age of 70. There is no wonder she fails to convey the news to the kids. One of them, Frederick, however, still manages to get mad at his mother. He seems bitter and resentful because his mother doesn't love him. Later that evening, when Anne and Theo leave, Nina comes up to Meline and asks how it all went. Surprisingly enough, Meline lies to her, saying that her kids agreed to sell the apartment and let go of their mother. And so, as Nina continues to go about the money-gathering process, Meline draws back and tells Bremont that she is no longer interested in selling the apartment. A few days go by then, and we see them sitting in the same park that we saw in the first scene. Trees seem much more mysterious now that we know that abnormal things tend to take place here. Theo is here too, playing ball with his friends. Suddenly their ball is thrown into the water, and they need an adult to help retrieve it. They call Meline then the most flexible of the individuals in the park. To help, the old woman gets a stick, starts reaching for the ball, and notices something very unusual and ominous in the water. It is a white dress resting on the bottom of the river. Secrets can live on for only a finite number of days. Medeline's secret turns out to have an especially short lifespan though. Very soon, by chance, Nina learns it directly from Bremont, and, infuriated, starts shouting at Meline in the street. She's enraged by the fact that, to this day, Meline is ashamed of being with her. This outrage is only natural, but perhaps Nina even regrets it in the next scene. Here, she enters Medeline's apartment and finds a burning pot, still on the stove. She understands immediately that something must have happened to her love. Rushing downstairs, she finds herself in front of an emergency van and watches as it drives away. She spent that night waiting in the hospital. As she learns from Anne, Meline suffered a heart attack. She will have to spend the entire night in the intensive care unit. It all seems very serious. Anne is really determined to send her home. Only family members should go so far as to stay in the hospital for the entire night. If only they knew how much Meline means to Nina, they wouldn't even offer to let her leave. Loneliness is unbearable for Nina throughout the course of the scenes, but what is even worse is now knowing how Meline is, or whether she will manage to come back. To soothe the pain of her abscess, Nina sleeps in Medeline's bed one night, but in the morning, she realizes that she made a mistake. The sound of the turning key wakes her up, and she hears two individuals enter the apartment. They are Anne and Frederick, and Nina is forced to hide from them. It is all even comical to see her face as she tries not to be seen, as if she were Raskolnikov, hiding after committing the murder. She didn't really slay their mother though, she just kissed her a million times throughout her life. What a terrible crime. Overhearing their conversation, Nina hears something very distressing. She learns that Meline might never speak again. She is alive. But as the doctors say, the stroke will inevitably have long-term effects. It is in the next scene that we first see Nina's apartment and get a better glimpse into her life. This life has already been forever changed. It is unbearable for Nina to see Meline's current state, but what makes it all worse is the sense of immeasurable guilt Nina feels. It is like a boulder crushing her back and nailing her to the ground. Time passes, and Meline finally gets out of the hospital in a wheelchair. There is one big problem though. A sick nurse or a carer by the name of Muriel will also have to live with her day and night. Muriel doesn't really seem to like the idea of making friends around the neighborhood. When Nina asks to see Meline, she sends her away. Time crawls, not flies that night. Feeling obsessed and restless, Nina does something very surprising. Sneaking across the hallway, she opens up Meline's apartment and sneaks inside stealthily to see her love. A true reincarnation of Bonnie Parker. She awaits a warm reunion, but what she sees is extremely heartbreaking. Meline is like glass. Awake but unresponsive, she is silent like a tree. Her personality seems to be completely destroyed. Nina visits her the next morning as well. The situation is already desperate, but the carer somehow still manages to make it worse. She maintains a polite stance, but stares at Nina like a bee, as if she were telling her that no guests are welcome with her. Something unusual happens then. As if Meline wanted to show that she still exists behind the thick carpet of impersonal glass, she pushes a plate full of food off the table. The ominous park is shown again in the next scene. Dreaming about it, Nina sees herself going down the river and retrieving the body of a drowned child wearing a white dress. That day, she fails to spend some time with Meline, and at night, she continues to have terrible nightmares. Not permitted to see her lover, she tries to sneak inside Meline's apartment once more, but this time she fails. Muriel almost manages to catch her. The conflict between the two women is clearly shown the next morning, when Nina indicates Muriel's mistakes to Anne. The latter seems to start looking at the carer with an eye of suspicion. Still, she has no other choice other than to lend her car for a day. Muriel's vehicle has broken down, and she has to take Meline to rehab. That night, Nina declares war for good. Sneaking out of the apartment building, she smashes Anne's car with a stick a few times and then draws back into the shadows once more. Now it will all look as if irresponsible Muriel broke Anne's car. That afternoon, when Muriel leaves the apartment to go grocery shopping, Nina rushes to see Meline. By showing pictures of them, she hopes to reawaken her memories, but to no avail. When the pictures prove unsuccessful, she puts on her favorite music and leaves Meline by herself for a little while. Something that resembles meaning suddenly appears in the woman's eyes. It is when Nina finally comes back that she sees her love on foot, leaning on the table. As it seems, she walked all on her own. It is all so delightful. Proud of her friend, hope appears in Nina's mind that Meline will soon recover, but suddenly, something happens that flushes happiness down her face. The sound of the music must have devoured the sound of clinking keys, since Muriel is already in the apartment, looking at her like she is without blinking. Her eyes are about to fall off as Nina confronts her openly for the first time. She offers her a deal, then, the deal of the century, assuring her that she can fire her without any problems. She says she will take care of Meline from now on. Muriel will still be paid, but instead of her, Nina will do the job. Who can decline such an offer? Muriel, however, shows greediness at this moment. Using the opportunity, she demands an additional 300 euros every month for her silence. And so, now both Nina and Muriel are responsible for Meline. They seem to have been quite proficient in negotiating, but as it turns out, their skill in taking care of an old woman is severely lacking. The next morning, Meline suddenly disappears, and the two are forced to pace the streets in search of her. Anxiety and tension rise as Nina tramps around the town, and it grows even more when the two women appear in Anne's car. The girl is furious with the carer for such irresponsibleness, and Muriel is helpless in front of her rage. There is nothing but hatred in her heart when she looks at Nina. They are the true reincarnations of Al Capone and Eliot Ness in this scene, or to be more precise, Elizabeth I of England and Queen Mary of Scotland. Thankfully, the police soon manage to find Meline, sitting in the ominous park. When the three women approach her, she grabs Nina's hand firmly and smiles at her, indicating that she still holds enormous meaning in her heart. Nina's whole life is consumed now. Eavesdropping and peeping have become her usual activities. Naturally, Muriel is soon fired, and even more naturally, she is eager to tell Nina something about it. The latter, however, isn't that willing to open the door. This means that Nina will get a chance to spend more time with Meline. In fact, she is now officially a prime caretaker of her. This also means that Anne and Nina will inevitably get closer over time. Naturally, Nina wanted to bond with her in completely different circumstances, but nothing could be done to bring back the time. At first, their conversation is so boring that Meline almost falls asleep in front of them. Perhaps she even wishes to be able to speak so that she can put an end to this madness. But soon Anne says something that changes the gears of the conversation immediately. As she points out, her mother always wanted to travel, especially before the accident. She didn't say anything about it, but she and Anne were close, so the girl understood it without words. In a way, she knows that Meline sacrificed herself for the family, and she will always appreciate her for it. It is tough to determine what Meline thinks about it, though. Listening to the conversation, her expressions shed light on what might be going on inside her mind. In the next scene, Anne notices Nina in a picture, in which she stands beside Meline. The picture was taken in Rome. Perhaps the girl will start to become suspicious that something has been hidden from her. That day, Meline bangs on Nina's door and falls into her arms. Exhausted, she almost loses her balance, so Anne is the one who is forced to take her back inside her apartment. This time, she is clearly suspicious. She clearly doesn't know something that is very important to this case. That evening, she turns over Medeline's entire house, searching for something that would indicate a special bond between her mother and Nina, but she fails to find anything important. Noises coming from Medeline's room woke her up that night. Coming over to check her out, she sees the old woman packing up to leave. The poor girl has to put in a lot of effort to make her stop. Tears start coming to her eyes as she fails to realize what is going on. As this turbulent moment is taking place, Nina is immersed in her obsessive state again. Failing to sleep, she sneaks inside Medeline's apartment once more and gets into her bed. Wherever Meline wanted to go, it was a good thing that she didn't. This moment between the couple is, beyond doubt, meaningful for both. Additionally, it only looks like a murder scene for a moment. When Anne wakes up the next morning, she has no idea that her mother is sleeping with another woman. Still, with her eyes closed, she passes the bed without noticing anything unusual. But once the curtains are thrown off, two bodies, instead of one, are revealed out of the darkness. Anne stands petrified for only a moment and then kicks her out immediately. Nina doesn't say anything at all. She must have fallen asleep without intention. To apologize or to explain everything, she came over later that afternoon. Buzzing the door, she stands there with no intention to leave, but Anne shows no mercy. She has no intention to open the door either. She's not ready to learn the big news, even though she already knows in the back of her head that her mother has been lying to her for her entire life. A minor overdramatization, perhaps. The next morning, the locks are changed at Medeline's apartment. What is even more disturbing for Nina, however, is that the apartment is empty. Medeline's things are taken somewhere else. Throughout the rest of the day, Anne keeps ignoring her. It all frustrates her beyond sanity, but to add to it all, something surprising happens. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Muriel appears together with some young man. Nina must be delighted to open up the door to them. As it turns out, the young man is Muriel's son, and they want their 300 euros. At first, Nina acts as if she doesn't understand what is going on. But when threats are made, she closes the door in anger. As this major criminal case is being taken care of, Anne, Frederick, and Meline are in a hospice. The latter is clearly hyped for this. Driving back, Frederick expresses his distress over this matter, but Anne tells him harshly that Meline cannot return home. This has definitely nothing to do with the Nina situation. That night, the latter pays the family a visit. It is obvious that she wants to talk, to reveal everything to them once she is let inside, but Frederick keeps telling her to go. This is why Nina decided to just say it. Angered by their arrogance, she lets them know that Meline never loved their father, that she is her true love, and that before the stroke, she wanted to move to Rome with her. The kids take it very well, of course. They're just a little upset and don't want to accept the truth. Instead, they prefer to send the delusional woman away with threats. Nina's a little upset too. Throwing a rock towards their widow, she freaks everyone out. The hospice started giving Meline a lot of new medication the next morning, even though she clearly didn't need a severe medical course. In fact, she is so well that she manages to sneak up to the phone and call Nina. She has no ability to speak, of course, but Nina still understands that it's Meline on the other side of the call. Soon a nurse comes by Meline and informs Nina about the whereabouts of the hospice. The woman rushes there like a hurricane and embraces Meline firmly. Encompassed by the group of other patients, they look like a flower in the middle of a weathered field. Somehow, Meline is a little calmer. This is her medicine. This is all she needs. The hospice director thinks otherwise, of course. He has a business to run and Medeline's daughter to assure. Anne is worried that her mother is given medicine inattentively and without enough prior research, but the director won't receive this kind of objection. If Anne wants Meline to keep living in this house, she can no longer object to the director's methods and interfere with the healing process. Perhaps he can even manage to stop Anne, but who he definitely cannot stop Nina. The director keeps talking and talking about meaningless procedures, but if he knew what was happening downstairs, he wouldn't be so confident in himself. Grasping Medeline's hand firmly, Nina heads towards the exit of the hospice. The expression on Medeline's face sheds light on the fact that she understands what is happening very well, and that she participates in this jailbreak willingly. A sense of meaning and happiness goes over her as she quickens her pace to catch up with her love. The only person who notices them run away is Anne, but surprisingly enough, she doesn't do anything to stop it immediately. It is delightful to see Medeline's face as they drive away. The only thing that they have left to do now is change, gather all the necessities in a very short time, and fly away to Rome. Definitely not too much to do for two old women, one of whom has a severe brain injury. The hopes are high, but what awaits upstairs is sadly going to try and crush their spirits. Nina's front door is open, and her money is taken away. Meline doesn't really understand the severity of the moment. She goes outside on the balcony and feels the breeze in her hair. It is truly a delightful evening, and she feels great, but all of this until she catches a glimpse of her daughter driving by downstairs. Even though her mind appears a bit foggy from the outside, she clearly understands what she has to do now. Getting back inside, she limps her way toward the apartment door and seals it shut. Anne tries to get in, of course. Now that she is truly afraid to lose her mother, she wants to talk. In an apologetic tone, she keeps on asking to open up, but the door remains shut, and the two women behind it keep dancing.